Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Despite her successful completion of the first test, Selena continues to train her weakened body. Her growing relationship with Kale stutters to a stop at the swift death of Sven, a competitor who attempts escape from the palace. Though she does her best to find comfort in her budding friendships, Selena cannot avoid the hurt of the past, finally giving in to the grief she has been staving off for a year. Dorian attempts to get closer to Selena and is surprised to find a complex woman and not the snarky assassin he assumes she'd be, finding in the process the determination to forego his mother's wishes to marry an eligible woman of court. Too soon, Selena braves the second test to prove herself the king's champion, but when she is close to victory, she chooses to stave a peer rather than claiming her prize.
Hey there, we're Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romance, romantasy books written by women, and so it is in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
With our combined 13 years of literary academic training, we use our education to analyze and give voice to reasons you may love or hate today's popular books.
This is part 1 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 16 through 22 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass. For the complete list of episodes and the chapter breakdowns, be sure to check out our Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Before we dive in, let's talk about Spilt. Spoilers, perspective and interpretation, language, and themes.
Spoilers. While our discussion is about Throne of Glass, important context from the first 3 novels in the series will be discussed without spoiler warning. That is specifically Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. This is not a read-along for anyone who hasn't read at least these 3 books, and you will be spoiled from here on out, so please take this as your only spoiler warning. For all other spoilers beyond Heir of Fire and other SJM works, we will be keeping those to our breadcrumbs and broomsticks areas at the end of the episode.
Perspective and interpretation. What we discuss in this episode are strictly our personal interpretation of the text. We do not speak for Sarah J. Maas and in no way know her intentions for her books or characters. We also know our listeners have their own personal views and opinions, and we encourage you to share your thoughts with us because every perspective and interpretation is worth exploring.
Even though I try to keep my swearing to a minimum for the sake of my mother, explicit language does occur. Amy does not give a fuck, though.
Never. Themes. We also discuss some heavy subjects throughout the podcast that can include themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death. While we will do our best to give trigger warnings for the darker themes, we will discuss these topics when they are important to the text. Listener discretion is advised.
As always, we love keeping the conversation going because our listeners are so good at finding things that we've overlooked or missed completely. You can share your interpretations of the text with us by posting on social media, tagging us in stories, sending us DMs, or submitting to the form on our website. We also post more exclusive content and host live streams for our Patreon supporters, so you can find us on patreon.com/booktalk for book talk. The question that we ask ourselves this week is, What is it about the lead up to this section, or this section specifically, that no longer allows Selena to run from her past and be forced to face her demons?
Themes we see in this section include vulnerability and performance. We're starting today's episode in chapter 16. Now, we ended last week's episode with Selena successfully completing the first test, which was archery. Remember that she was bitter that Cain did so well and everyone was praising him. Now, despite all her arrogance up until this point, despite her bitterness, Selena is faced with a harsh reminder that no matter what her skill level was once before, she still remains weak, whether or not she thinks she's the best of the best. Quote, Selena gasped for air as she ran beside Cale in the game park. If he was winded, he didn't show it, other than the gleam of sweat on his face and the dampness of his white shirt. Now, this is just realistic and a really good reminder for the reader at this point. Just because she completed the first test, just because she did a decent job at archery, does not mean she's overcome a year of slavery, does not mean her body is up to snuff. I think that this accomplishes two things. SJM is making sure we are constantly reminded of Selena's current physical ability relative to Cale's so that we are conscious of the moment it changes because of all her training. Also, I think it's so that we, like Selena, learn to have respect for Cale on some level, regardless of his bad attitude or how we perceive him.
It's almost like when you not go to the gym for a couple weeks and then suddenly it's as if you haven't been in
In a year.
years,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because I haven't been to the gym in months. So,
Yeah, it's no fun getting
no.
back into it.
Mm-mm.
Now, Selena, like us, does not like this reminder of how hard it is to get back into shape. Quote, she took a shuddering breath, holding on tightly to the tree as she vomited. She hated the warmth of the tears that leaked from her eyes, but couldn't wipe them away as she heaved again, gagging. I'm a strong believer that Selena is actually crying here, not because of the act of vomiting, but because her pride is hurt, because she is still weak, and because Cale is now audience to her shame. It's not something she goes off on her own and does, and Cale has an inkling of. He is actually witnessing it this time.
I like
On
that.
thanks. On some level, I also had a moment where I was like, oh, I think her pride and why this is so aggravating to her is because of her secret lineage. She is Fae. We know this by Heir of Fire. And yet she is being reduced to being human and weaker than humans around her. And that's demonstrated in the act of her vomiting. So no wonder why she's trying to hide it, because deep down she knows she should be better than them.
So I want to look at this quote, but slightly different, just a different aspect of it. Quote, she hated the warmth of the tears that leaked from her eyes, but couldn't wipe them away as she heaved again, gagging. Cale stood nearby, just watching. I think that this also really shows that there's still an imbalance between the two. And right now, we're going to really see just how much Cale is still over her, like, physically, because he's taller and she's throwing up, but also because he is the captain, he is ready to fight. And even though she's Faye, even though she's this notorious assassin, he's still stronger than her. However, I really want to hone in on these moments where she is showing him her weakness and he's not saying anything about it, and it displays a level of trust, because we're going to see the two of them really building this level of trust throughout
Mm-hmm.
this episode. Some would say this book.
I think that's a great point, especially in this scene juxtaposed to the rest of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
There is a level of trust here that gets challenged.
Which makes sense why her feelings will be hurt later.
Mm-hmm.
This episode, we're going to see Selena start to accept the truth around her and with herself and her surroundings. It's almost as if we made it the question of the episode. Quote, it had still been 3 days since the first test, 10 since her arrival at Rifthold, and she was still horribly out of shape. Before she was really peacocking, hyping herself up, and now this reality is slowly and quickly, I mean, I'm saying slowly and quickly, that doesn't work, is starting to quickly dawn on her. She's accepting this about herself, and we're going to get a lot more moments of honesty from here on out.
Honestly, it's so relatable. Like, after 10 days of working out, yeah, I want to have a flat stomach and abs. Like, Honestly, I from a writing perspective, it feels longer than 10 days
Yeah,
since the arrival to Rifthold. So, whatever. I'm grateful for the marker that SJM is
agreed.
giving us
Agreed.
to give us some context because I would have been like, it's been a month.
I know. I love it when they do remind me how many days have passed.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can be outraged. Only this many days have passed?
Yeah, exactly. Now, we hear from a lot of our listeners that many dislike kale, and I want to acknowledge why that might be the case. Once Selena is done vomiting, quote, done, Kale asked. She lifted her head to give him a withering glare, but everything spun, dragging her down with it, and she retched again. I told you not to eat before we left. Now, on one hand, we know where Selena's at. She is desperate to regain her former strength, which means she's made the poor choice to eat before she runs. Because remember, food is power. Because she chooses to eat, it ultimately has the opposite effect. Instead of making her stronger, the food is highlighting her weakness by making her wretch in front of Kale, who should be her enemy. Ultimately, Kale is not wrong. His approach is douchey and questionable, but I'm inclined to believe he's actually mocking Selena for her weakness because he has figured her out. He knows when he mocks her, when he rankles her pride, it motivates her to push herself harder. And he's using that kind of reverse psychology on Selena to make her better.
And they're just so similar to each other because I would see Selena doing this to him right back.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to kind of expand that quote that you referenced. Quote, I told you not to eat before we left. Are you done being smug? Are you done vomiting your guts up? For the time being, she snapped. Perhaps I won't be so courteous next time and I'll just vomit all over you instead. If you can catch me, he said with a half smile. So, I mean, you have I told you so, but then you also have this humor between the two. It like
Mm-hmm.
they are getting very comfortable. He's able to really tease her. And that was one that made me laugh. You know, I was like, that's funny. And I feel like Selena with him does get to these points of, all right, that was funny. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I can't be mad. That was a good one.
Yeah, they match each other blow for blow,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also part of the respect that's developing between the two of them. It's not just about fighting prowess, it's also about, can you match my energy? And
Yeah.
they do match each other's energy.
Yeah. I am a sucker. Match my energy and I will either be your friend forever or sleep with you. We have two options. There's no third. Date you. I mean, date you.
It's in this act of throwing up and sweating that Kale sees the scars on Selena's back for the first time through her wet shirt. Kale asks, quote, what did you do to deserve it? And the crowd screams, fuck the patriarchy.
I was screaming, "Fuck the patriarch!" Wait, keychain on the ground. I'll Taylor Swift. I'm better I'm better than this. I can reference All Too Well another time. I'm just caught up right now. And you were tossing me the car keys. Fuck the patriarchy. Keychain on the ground. All right, you can continue.
Okay, I'm glad you had your moment.
Okay.
You look too good. I have to put you down somehow, right?
No,
No,
that's
I'm
not
teasing.
friendship.
I'm teasing. Selena, quote, laughed sharply. No one deserves to be whipped like an animal. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. I arrived in Endovier, and they dragged me into the center of the camp and tied me between the whipping posts. 21 lashes. Now, I'm looking at this through the Marxist lens, so I'm really caught on the animal reference here. Kale, I genuinely think he's just really naive to the world and how things work outside of his moral compass because he is so black and white. He cannot fathom that people have different morals than he does. And because of that, he assumes that when someone is punished, it is with just cause. So if Selena has scars from being whipped, she must have deserved it. What he doesn't understand, and I think we have to give him grace for, is the fact that individuals, including guards and probably guards that report to him, will use power and punishment as a way of exerting their domination and demonstrating, their superiority, as
Mhm.
was the case for Selena. She's Aderlin's greatest assassin, and now she's in prison. Of course, the guards are going to beat her. It's a power trip for them. Therefore, they're going to put her down like an animal because that makes them feel, superior, puts her in her place, and hopefully beats the spirit out of her.
Before we get into this next section, quick trigger warning about sexual assault. I want to just make a little note about this quote because I feel like I like her having this sense of compassion, right? That there is no reason to not treat people like a human being, and that you need to a reminder that people are people and they're not animals.
Mm-hmm.
However, she's going to very quickly go opposite of what she just said, and I want you to know I agree with all of this, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't not point it out. Selena then starts to tell the story about her first night in Endovir and how she was, and after she was whipped. The next morning, a woman showed her some kindness. Quote, "A young woman slipped me a tin of salve while we were waiting in line for breakfast. I never got to thank her. Later that day, 4 overseers raped and killed her." I won't even just note that, like, it's not even like Selena said that they caught her helping Selena and therefore raped and killed her. That wasn't made known. It was that just happened. And I think that's another important distinction because it's really showing just how much violence there is against women here in this world, and that it might even be beyond being punished for kindness. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the norm there. Then Selena keeps talking about what happened at Endovir. Quote, "The day I snapped, I stopped by their sections of the mines to repay them for what they did to her. Something frozen rushed through her veins. They died too quickly. I want it. No. Yes, those men should have died. 100% they should have died. This is uh, you're not getting any complaints from me. However, we just got her saying that no person deserves to be whipped, and then she talks about having to wanting and doing and actually have done kill these men. And I'm going to keep going on that, but I just want to like have a quick beat and notice that. And just note that the rules for Selena are different. And maybe you can say the rules for harming women are different, which I agree, like you hurt women, you should be put to death.
I mean, what she did was, as you like to call it, a reverse Uno on them,
Yeah.
right? They treated her like an animal, so she treated them like pigs and did
Oh,
what?
put a rubber band around their balls and castrate them.
No. She murdered them. She slaughtered them.
Yeah, yeah. Now into this next quote. "But you were a woman in Endovir," Kale said, his voice rough and quiet. "No one ever," he trailed off, unable to form the word. She gave him a slow, bitter smile. "They were afraid of me to begin with, and after the day I almost touched the wall, none of them dared to come close to me. But if one guard tried to get too friendly, well, he'd become the example that reminded the others I could easily snap again if I felt like it." So Kale's worried about sexual violence against Selena, but he can't even form the words. And I feel like that just shows a level of privilege that men get, that they don't even have to worry about it. I mean, I don't want to act like there's no sexual assault towards men. That is a very real thing, especially within prisons and systems like that. However, there is a privilege where you have men like Hale who lives in this world of morals, and everyone must have the same black and white morals as me. And women are, they get hurt. And now that he's talking to a woman who was at risk and potentially could have been assaulted, now suddenly it's become a lot more real. And it reminds me of I've met a fair amount of men who have been friends that claim that they never thought that catcalling was real because they never noticed it. And I was just, I mean, the number of times where I was like, all right, stand behind me. Stand behind me. Don't walk with me. Let's see what happens. And it's just that kind of thing of like, what? It's real. They don't notice it until it's in their face. And that is
Mhm.
100% a privilege that some men get to live with, unfortunately. I mean, fortunate, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to that almost naivety, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't notice it until it is directed to someone that they care about. And I think that's also the other point about this conversation
Yeah.
is demonstrating that Kale is starting to care about
Mm-hmm.
Selena. The fact that he can't even form the words in relation to her being assaulted,
Yeah.
it's not just about the assault, it's about the idea of Selena being assaulted.
Agreed. Agreed. Again, more complaints about like things I've heard from men all over time. It's like when guys are like, of course I support women. I have a mother, I have sisters, I have daughters. And it's like, why do you need to have all of those things to
Mhm.
support women? Why can't you just support women?
Yeah. Yep.
Stop. Like,
Yep.
end, period, stop. That's it. So,
Yep.
and that's giving me the same vibes that Kale's doing here. He's like, I know a woman once. I care now. And I'm going to keep pointing out various moments where, there's some complicated Arabin moments throughout this episode and, going forward for all the books probably. Quote, she didn't need to voice her other suspicions that perhaps somehow Arabin had bribed the guards in Endovier for her safety. It's a really complicated relationship. It's going to be really messy. And I hate that like her danger from men is being solved from men. You know what I mean? Like she's in danger from all these men, and so now you have a man who's coming in and helping her. Now, even though, like she said, she would fight them off and stuff, there's still that added element where you're like,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I love the hints at Arobin because there's definitely plenty, and we don't know how to feel about this guy. He
Hmm.
wants her to break her hand, but he also will pay guards to not harm her in prison. So it is a very complex relationship, and I love that we get the little breadcrumbs about it because it prepares us for when we do eventually meet him.
Hmm. Hmm.
At the end of the scene, Selena exclaims, quote, we each survive in our own way. Selena didn't quite understand the softness in the look he, Kale, gave her as he nodded. She only stared at him for a moment longer before she burst into a run up toward the hill, where the first rays of sunshine began to peek through. I love the use of the sun in this scene, partially because of how it's going to come back and slap us in the face in the next scene. But it is a really interesting moment from my point of view. So let's look at the sun and what it symbolizes here. I think it could be a whole host of things. It could be symbolic of this moment being kind of healing after Selena's been vulnerable and spoken her truth to Kale and has found empathy on his side. The sun rising could be, Selena sprinting towards like Kale being like, here, accept my truth, and finding that empathy and how that empathy is growing within him. It could also be about their budding intimacy, and that's emotional intimacy, not physical intimacy, because shared vulnerability creates intimacy. I like to think about this also in the context of other SJM works because the sun is often associated with mates and true mates, which now we do know that to not be the case with these two. So why the use of the sun if that is SJM's kind of pattern? Now this is her first book, so she hasn't developed that pattern yet. A. B, I think it is also misleading for a number of reasons, which one of which we'll get into in the next scene. But I also feel like it is just demonstrating to us as readers the realness of the relationship between Selena and Kale versus the artifice that is going to be Selena and Dorian.
Okay. I'm so excited because, like, as you're talking, thoughts happened. It's such a poignant moment, right? Like she runs into the sun, and it's definitely some over, running into hope, running into the light,
Right.
running into the positivity. And then you have this later on, we're hinting towards when Sven tries to run away, you get the
Mm-hmm.
sun glistening there. However, you have two moments of emotional intimacy in this episode. One where she opens up to Kale and she runs into the light and you have a positive exchange. And then you have another one with Dorian where she's in shadows and darkness and closes the door on him. Now, you could start to say, well, wow, you can see which one is the more positive dynamic between the two, which, Kale is the better match for her out of these two men.
Mm-hmm.
However, the sun that he might represent her running into ends up with blood on the floor and death,
Mhm.
which could represent his future betrayal
Yeah,
of
I
her.
mean, I think so. I think it's definitely foreshadowing the events of the next book.
Mhm.
It's very cinematic. This
Yeah.
I can see it as a movie
Mhm.
of the two of them talking. The sun is rising, and then she sprints up the hill
Mhm.
into the sun, and she's backlit in silhouette. I I think it's very beautiful, and SJM does this constantly in this book, especially. She gives us these really beautiful or real moments just to
Mhm.
slap us in the face. And I think this is one of those moments, and I think it's very, very well done.
Yeah.
So let's jump into that next scene. Now, apropos of the end of that scene, we get to see firsthand what it requires to survive in the world, especially the one Selene is in right now, which is ultimately you will be shot down like an animal if you make a wrong move. So Sven is one of the champions who's competing in this, series of tests with Selena. He attempts to escape and attacks one of the guards in that attempt. Ultimately, he is shot down by the guards around him. Quote, bows groaned as the archers on the mezzanine pulled their strings taut and aimed at the rest of the contestants. Selena kept still, as did Knox, who was standing close beside her. One wrong movement and a spooked guard could kill her. Even Kane didn't breathe too deeply. Talk about a bitch slap in the face. The vulnerability of that moment between Selena and Kale is juxtaposed against the brutality of the scene. Like, they did not hesitate to kill Sven.
Mm-mm.
And we see that brutality best symbolized in the use of sunlight. Quote, the sunlight shone through the doors, illuminating the champion's splattered blood like stained glass. Now, unlike the last scene, the sunlight is revealing the very harsh truth, not only about Selena's circumstances, but also about the relationship she's going to have with Kale ultimately. No matter how much Kale may come to understand her or empathize with her, she is ultimately still a prisoner and will be treated like chattel, just like in Dovier. And I mean, in case you didn't notice, the first thing Selena clocks is Kale running to the guard who's been beaten down and ignoring the body of the dead champion.
Mhm.
Like, she sees his lack of empathy in that moment. She doesn't process it, but we process it.
It's funny. I didn't process it. I was just thinking, what do you think you're doing? Of course he's gonna get shot down. You fools. That's
Well, it speaks to her level of comfort,
it
right?
does. I mean, because she would never expect that from Kale.
Right, exactly.
Because that's, but at the same time, they made it very clear at the beginning, you do any funny business, you're gone. So,
Yep.
That's on her for not paying attention to orientation day.
It was syllabus day. She missed it.
Showed up a little bit late, a little quiet, tired from the night before. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, they're all chattel, they're all victims to the will of men around
Mm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we continue, I would like to give a trigger warning to the topic of suicide.
Now, what Selena noodles on as this is playing out is that Sven's death is ultimately about choice and about the power of choice. Quote, maybe he'd realized he had no chance of winning and that this kind of death was far better than returning to whatever place he'd come from. Sven had wanted to prove a point, she understood, and understood only because of that day she had come within a fingertip of touching the wall at Endovier. Now, Sven, like all the other contestants, is or was ultimately powerless given the circumstances. He made a choice, and there's power in that choice about how and when he would die in order to have some control over his life. It's probably a much quicker, painless death compared to some of the other things that might happen during one of the tests, the trials, or by whatever's lurking in the castle that's killing champions. Yeah, I'd also rather have an arrow to the throat, I think, because at least I'm dead immediately. Sever my spinal cord. Fine.
It's not like the first test was all that dangerous. I'm just saying it was real like
Yeah, but the fact that
bow and arrow.
you have a champion who's been brutally murdered.
Yeah, that's not great. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it speaks volumes to what kind of sponsor they have.
Also true. Also true. Or where Sven might go back to.
Yeah.
As Selena's thinking about this, I really feel like her reflection humanizes Sven, which is not something she's done consciously for any of the other contestants up until this point.
Hmm.
And I think that humanization is only possible because she took the time to explain what happened the day she almost touched the wall and why that day made her snap. And the fact that she can correlate her experience, her thoughts, her feelings from that moment to Sven's death and what he must have been going through makes him more like her.
Yeah.
And I think it's really sneaky, smart setup on SJM's part
Hmm.
to have been able to tell the story about touching the wall and then using it to relate to someone Selena might not normally have related to.
It was such a good harken back moment. It's
Mm-hmm.
a good mirroring moment. And I think it also shows her will to live
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and saying, I was there once, implying that she's not there now.
Yeah.
So I want to keep looking at that moment and at this quote. What had made Sven risk it? And why here, right now? There were still 3 days until the second test. What had made this moment so special? That day she snapped in Endovier, she hadn't been thinking about freedom. No, she'd picked the time and place and started swinging. She never meant to escape. There's that level that we were talking about, is her able to sympathize with calling it what it is, a suicide attempt. Uh, isn't it like what they call it? I think they like for nowadays it's like suicide by cop or suicide by people do that now, like even in this world where it's not assisted suicide, but it's like suicide. Are you looking it up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Suicide by cop.
Yeah, so there's a concept of suicide by cop, and that's what this is. And it's basically people who are choosing death and are going to do it in a way that involves others doing it for them, essentially. And
Yeah.
that's because, like you were saying earlier, they have to take control. And Selena knows what it's like to not have control. It makes you appreciate how much control she does have right now. Now, granted, it's not like she's out here living her best life necessarily, but she has the control of books to read. She has the control of what to do, waking up early in the morning, pushing herself. So like, there are some things, and it's a good moment for her to reflect on where she is and
Mm-hmm.
where she was.
Mm-hmm.
And, kind of going back to what Amy was saying with the whole spotlight on the blood thing, I think it just a really good moment of saying before Sunshine was hope and now it's a spotlight on death. And I'm really curious to see how much Sunshine is going to represent Kale. Like how much of
Mm.
it is him representing hope, but then does he also represent death?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. It's like tingling something in my brain. I actually do think he's been associated with the sun leading up to this from
Mm-hmm.
early on when she describes either his eye color or his appearance, the way he
Mm-hmm.
looks. So, might be something for us to pay
Keep
attention
keep
to.
flagging, because I think he's very deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah. I
We're gonna
agree.
root for him, and then he's gonna hurt us so bad.
Yep. 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 Now, after this spotlight on the blood on the floor, I feel like the scene could have ended, but SJM wants to take it one step further with Selena's thoughts, or Selena wants to think these thoughts overtly. So let's read them. Quote, Aderlin could take their freedom. It could destroy their lives and beat and break and whip them. It could force them into ridiculous contests. But, criminal or not, they were still human. Dying, rather than playing in the king's game, was the only choice left to him. Still staring at his outstretched hand, forever pointing toward an unreachable horizon, Selena said a silent prayer for the dead champion and wished him well. Now, I do get goosebumps from that last sentence every time I read it. But the first two, Aderlin could take their freedom, but, they're human. I don't feel like that was necessary. I felt like we have already reached this understanding as readers. So why put it in there? Selena must need this reminder right now. That's the only way I can explain it. Selena needs to remind herself that she is human, that the other contestants, no matter where they came from, are still human. I also think what SJM is trying to achieve is that we as readers, like Selena, should not judge others without the information because anyone's circumstances could be the same as Selena's. It also does a really good job in that one last sentence of highlighting Selena's goodness and her capacity for empathy. Because what we've really seen up until this point is how vain Selena is, how selfish she can be, but it seems to mean a lot for her to stop and say a prayer.
I do like this about Selena. I do like this level of empathy. And I understand that because I try to remind myself that level of empathy, when people talk about, is it right to kill prisoners, sentence them, the death sentence? Is that all right? I personally, try very hard to find the empathy. And, there's too many innocent men and women in there, you don't really always know. And so there's a similarity there, right? Of her saying, I must have this empathy. We do not know what's going on. However, she was judge, jury, executioner for those men who did rape and kill the woman who helped her. And it's something that I go back and forth with because, like I said, I try very hard to be like, there's innocent men in the prison system. Is that something that we should be doing as well? But then all of a sudden, when you have something where it's like, oh, hello, serial killer and serial rapist, you're gone. You can die. Like, suddenly my empathy and my morals go away pretty quickly. It is a beautiful moment and it is a great moment for her. I think that it's also meant to be a moment of struggling to understand these two things that are hard to grapple with. It's easy for me to grapple with it because I am an American citizen and I'm voting. It's not like I'm putting laws into effect. What's different for her is that she is a queen, that she will one day have a kingdom to rule. And those are things that she will actually be judge, jury, executioner, and will
Mhm.
actually have to make those decisions of, well, when does my empathy end and where does it begin?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really great point, and I think that it in the context of seeing how black and white Kale is and seeing how nuanced Selena's world is,
Mm-hmm.
these are all really important learning opportunities for Selena, but also highlight the difficulty of how do you rationalize all these different aspects of the
Yeah.
world that you're encountering. She is young, she's not 19, she can't necessarily see at the moment the way that she is in some ways replicating what the guards of Endovier have done.
Yeah.
And she's not maybe mature enough yet to think through that complexity, but she's encountering it. And I think all of that is eventually going to inform who she
Mm-hmm.
is and the choices she makes.
And it's her assumption of what this character Sven was doing. If this was Kane, would she
She
have had that empathy? No, she
probably
wouldn't.
not.
And what if, like, Kane was going through the exact same thing that Sven was going through and was peacocking the way Selena was? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it, empathy is nuance. Empathy is so biased. Empathy
Yeah.
is not, it's so hard to have general empathy and not just say, pick and choose who you're going to feel sorry for. And it works that it's Sven because she knows nothing about him. She doesn't know why he's in prison. It's not the eye eater. It's not the man who
Yeah.
sexually assaults women, you know? It's
Yeah.
not Kane.
And I think her ignorance of Sven's background allows her to have that
Yes.
empathy,
Yep,
right? It's
yep.
selective. Uh, I'll tell a quick personal story. You can keep this in. I used to teach in the prison system in Arizona. I volunteered my time during school and after I graduated from college. But the second my aunt was incarcerated and I knew what she was incarcerated for, I
Mhm.
couldn't do it anymore.
Oh, really? I thought you stopped doing it for other reasons.
I mean, I was kicked out of prison. That is also another reason. However, however, I was never able to go back and I was never able to
Mhm.
develop empathy for my aunt
Yeah,
because I knew about what
her.
she
Yeah.
did.
Yep.
And that's kind of the complexity that I think we're seeing with Selena right now.
Yeah, and what I like about this, though, and what I like about what SJM has done here, at least for me, I'm not walking away with this is the answer. I'm
Mhm.
walking away with there's a lot of weird, complicated nuances. And if there's at least like one person at a time to build empathy for, one person at a time.
Yeah. We are now in chapter 17 and we're in Dorian's point of view. And I have to start by saying this chapter genuinely shocked me because I keep forgetting who Dorian is. Like, I only remember the Dorian of the Kingdom of Ash, the last book in the series. And his journey is so long and complex that I forgot what he starts as. And he's bored and lazy and complacent. And that is clearly conveyed in this chapter.
He sucks. He sucks so much. He's a fuckboy that doesn't deserve a chance.
Hmm.
Genuinely. Even his internal monologue doesn't give him a chance for me. Like it's incredible that he goes from this to princeling. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
Great journey. But let's get into the quote here. With heavy eyes, Dorian Havillard tried not to slouch as he sat upon his throne. Now, you might be like, Jack, that's like not bad, but wait, it's going to get much worse than this. But we're clearly getting a sense that he is not interested in where he is. He is bored. He hates his position, but he also doesn't know how to be anything else than that. And what we're going to see in the next section is just how much he goes back from like, I hate this to like, but I am this and I choose not to try anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is a great sentence, partially because it shows how little respect or pride he has in his birthright, for lack of a better word, and who he is in the court. And like, when we see the court through his eyes, I can kind of understand it. But my dude, try harder.
Read the quote and then I'll complain.
Sure. So, as Jack read, Dorian is fighting off sleep as he attends his mother's court. Quote, music and chatter flitted through the air, wooing him to sleep, almost as if, court is a lullaby. That's so weird. And if that weren't enough, if all the courtiers and the party essentially that's going on in court right now weren't enough, the fact that there's been a murder in the castle doesn't bother him either. Quote, he'd worry about that, the dying champions later, if it became an issue. Which it wouldn't if Kale was looking into it. It had probably just been a drunken brawl.
Dude, his guts were gone.
Yeah.
There was no blood. Okay, continue. But sure, drunken brawl.
Yeah.
Idiot.
Dorian is so disengaged. He is disinterested in life that court and death are of no interest to him. And when I stop to think about this, in my mind, this is exactly what comfort looks like. Dorian comes across as lazy because he's comfortable. He is confident in Kale, the security, and his circumstances in general as as a prince of this court. And just in this simple description, I feel like SJM has done a great job establishing Dorian's character before she takes it all away from him.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. She does a wonderful job with him. And he's so not interested in his responsibilities. Well, first off, he doesn't even see that he has responsibilities. He doesn't
Right.
even deem to take on responsibilities. And life is as boring as you make it.
Yeah.
And this is now a life lesson to the listener, one that I learned in my 20s. There were times where I was definitely bored with life and I just felt so stagnant and still. Now, having a podcast and writing ends up being super busy. But in those times, life is as interesting as you make it. Go volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
go be helpful, find a local charity, see what you can do. That is now something that you are working towards. You are helping, you are finding something. How can you contribute to a world if you're so bored with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a prince, it doesn't matter how much of a dickbag father you have, you can still go be useful. Go do some princely shit.
Yeah, I mean, he could have ownership in the safety of the palace and his mother while his father is away.
Yeah.
He could be right beside Kale,
Mhm.
helping protect the place or giving Kale commands on what to do.
Yeah.
Instead, he's essentially handing that over to Kale. And Kale is both captain of the guard and prince in that way.
And then complains about having nothing to do, and I'm just like bored, and but at the same time there's that level of judginess, right? There's that level of "Ugh, everyone here is just boring and everyone sucks." And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? How are you contributing? You're not interesting.
Yep. And I think part of that comes from Dorian's general disillusionment of court, because at the end of the day, what we can see from his point of view is that everything is a giant performance, and he knows that. And ultimately, the performance exists to lull him to sleep. So why engage in something willingly if it's just part of the performance at the end of the day? Dorian observes, quote, "The nobility strutted across the floor of the court, gossiping, scheming, seducing. An orchestra played minuets in a corner, and servants slipped through the gathered nobles in a dance of their own as they refilled and cleared plates and cups and silverware." I mean, I get it. If that's all you have to watch every day, boring. Go participate. Or
Go do something. Go
don't
contribute.
Be here.
Yeah. I mean, if what Selena said earlier was that reading wasn't in fashion. Go make it in fashion.
Yep.
Go strike up a conversation. You're the prince. People are going to do what you do.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to say it later, but I'm going to say it now. He's such a pick-me.
He really is.
He's just not like other princes, Amy. He's also really harsh on his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "His mother was still beautiful, though her face was a bit wrinkled and cracked with powder, and her auburn hair had a few silver streaks. Today she was swathed in yards of forest green velvet and floating scarves and shawls of gold, and her crown upheld a sparkling veil that gave Dorian the distinct impression she was wearing a tent upon her head." Why do we have to bring her age into this? Like, it's the fuck. Look, it's harder to do your makeup as you get older around your eyes, and some things just sometimes settles in there. Okay, leave her alone and stop judging women on having crinkles in their eyes. Like, that means she had an interesting life and she laughed a lot, even though she sucks and she's racist. But in this moment, I will defend her. Also, I do want to note that she's not wearing red, which we've kind of just shown that it is a very, villain evil thing. She's wearing Terrasin green, some might say. So I think that it might be just a little note that she is, potentially not the true evil of this story, even though she's going to show some racist tendencies in a few minutes. She might be a product of abuse of her situation, and, leave her fucking tent over her head alone.
I think that's a great point. And, part of Dorian's view of his mother, we learn he's 19 because of their conversation. And it's such a 19-year-old thing to do. He's projecting evil onto his mother because he doesn't like what she has to say, which is, Dorian, go get married. That doesn't make her evil.
No.
She likes court. He doesn't. That doesn't make her evil.
She is sociable. She likes talking to people. Why is it that we're doing this again? We're dismissing women's interests. She likes to talk to people. She likes to gossip. Okay, let her.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Jack, as you know, I cannot resist Pride and Prejudice. I will always go back to it.
And because we can't get enough of it, I am so excited to tell everyone about Dipsy and how they're bringing to life Mr. Darcy with their sexy British voice actors.
Dipsy is a female-founded app for spicy audiobooks and more.
It's created by women for the female gaze.
Their app has over 1,000 spicy audiobooks, all crafted by a team of professional writers and top-tier narrators.
Whether you're looking for a rugged cowboy or a Scottish sailor or a sexy rendition of Pride and Prejudice or the god of the underworld, you'll find characters you'll love on Dipsy.
With their easy-to-explore app, you can search for your favorite romance genres like contemporary, historical, dark, sports, western, romantasy, sapphic, yes, and more.
New chapters are released every week, so you'll always find something new to enjoy.
I can't wait to dip into Dipsy more.
Right now, our listeners can dip into Dipsy as well. Listeners of this show can get an extended 30-day free trial. Just go to dipsystories.com/booktalk to start your free trial.
That's DIPSEA stories.com/booktalk. BOOKTALK for 30 days of full access for free.
Let's all dip over and visit dipsystories.com/booktalk.
As most of our listeners know, I'm getting married, and let me tell you, getting married is expensive.
Let me tell you, being a guest to your wedding is expensive, and that's where Acorns come in.
Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future, and in my case, my wedding.
You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you to your money goals.
You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change.
Money planning stresses me out quite a bit, and Acorns makes it so easy.
It only takes 5 minutes to create an account with Acorns and start investing. It gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money on track, which is sometimes just the hardest part.
I love it because no matter what age you are, it's always important to be able to take control of your money and your investments.
So sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/booktalk, that's BOOKTALK, or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK. My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan, I can wear it on its own, I can wear it with a blazer, and it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.
En los viernes de papitas gratis, llévate unas papitas medianas con una compra mínima de $1 en el app de McDonald's y guarda esa reserva secreta para después, como en 2 minutos. Pa. Válida los viernes una vez al día hasta el 12:30 y 1.25 McDonald's participantes. Excluye impuestos. Debes haberte registrado en Rewards.
Now, part of the reason why Dorian feels the way he feels towards his mother is because he is nothing better than an ornament, or basically a doll that the queen dresses up in clothes of her choosing. Now, if clothing is power, Dorian has none because his mother picks the clothing, picks the colors, picks the combinations, and she even makes him wear boots that his manly pride can't stand because they're too new. Which, I didn't realize it was in your notes. I apologize. Cut it out. Cut it out.
No, we'll come back to it. That's fine.
No wonder why Dorian is disengaged and angry at his mother. He is not meant to do anything but sit there and look pretty. And you know what? What a privileged place that is. I want to sit here and look pretty.
we are sitting here looking pretty, but we have to work and talk too.
Yeah.
It's hard. Use our brain. Dorian is like a child. However, he allows it. He's allowing his mother to pick the clothes for him. He's allowing her to, tell him what to do. It's complacency, even with his internal complaints. Quote, the pants, mercifully, were light gray, though his chestnut suede boots looked too new for masculine pride. Masculine pride, bitch, shut up. They're too new. No, they don't look rugged or used or worn at all. Then don't wear them. Or go wear them and use them. I don't know. Do something. Your body. You can go wear what you want.
But also, like, what do you do that your boots wouldn't look new all the time? You don't do anything.
He doesn't do anything. He just goes looks at dogs and then comes back. You're not. Yeah, it's complaining about something that he is absolutely capable of changing.
Exactly. And what this highlights for me, and the conversation between Dorian and his mother highlights, are these really interesting power dynamics. Now, again, in Dorian's mind, this makes his mother evil, but I want to look at it from, the lens of what is the queen doing that the king isn't doing, that we might expect the king to be doing. In other books that we've read, for example, One Dark Window, or other kind of medieval-esque fantasy stories, it's often the king telling the son, it's time for you to get married. It's time for you to give me an heir, because it's about maintaining power in the family. The king's not doing that. The king's not dressing him, not bringing him to court, not telling him to get married. It's the queen who does it. And what that is achieving is it allows the queen power in a place where I'm going to assume she is powerless against a king who secretly has evil in him. She's probably been abused, like you said earlier, and has no power, especially when you look at the fact that her youngest son is, sent away. She has no say in his life, despite her wanting to. So what does she do? She controls Dorian because she can't control anything else. She tells Dorian, quote, there are plenty of young women who might make a good wife, though a princess would be preferred. Now, this is, again, a conversation I would expect the king to have, not the queen. The king is the one who's going to tell his son who to marry so that the royal line stays strong. In some ways, the queen is kind of pushing the envelope on what she can control, but the king's not here, so why not? And just the little cherry on top, the queen calls Dorian Pet. Her pet name for her son is Pet. It's another power move, making Dorian no better than a pet dog.
What is it, like in Pirates of the Caribbean? Captain Jack calls Keira Knightley's character Pet.
I
know. Remove the Johnny Depp of it. I like it.
Before Johnny Depp was problematic, I still liked it.
Oh, yeah. No, like if I can remove him entirely and just have that, then yeah. Oh. But it is weird calling your own son Pet. That is a sense of control. It does show that she has zero control except for this one child.
Yep.
And, even men here are breeding stock, except not nearly as much as women. So because damn, do we just group women in the most trash way possible here.
I do appreciate that SJM does equally allow men to be viewed for their breeding potential as much as women in her stories. Maybe not as much, but
not much. It is an aspect. They are viewed as breeding stock as well.
Yes.
Not nearly as much as women. However, it is still
present.
Yeah. And the reason why is we'll get into the list, but the queen brings up Nehemia and she says, quote, oh, don't worry. I wouldn't force you to marry her. I'm surprised your father allows for her to still bear the title. The impetuous haughty girl. Do you know she refused to wear the dress I sent her? There was someone that says there's some racist undertones. There's some, and you might be like, hey, what are the racist undertones? Well, here's one example of many I feel like you can draw from. One of the things that the queen talks about with Nehemia is her haughty attitude. And it makes me think about the trope of, quote, angry Black woman. And it is a very damaging, very bad, poor, I was about to like use a fancy word, but it's just a shit trope where it's an angry Black woman. And it's hard because then you had the other pendulum of that, where then you get a lot of like overly, I think they call them like the witchy friend, like very sensitive Black girl. And then it ends up being, well, now Black women can't be angry or too much. Like you just can't be a human anymore, and you
Yeah.
don't get to be annoyed. You don't get to have any of these attitudes, because who's another person who has the exact same attitude, who is also haughty, who doesn't like shit? Selena, who is white and does not get that same dismissal, right? Granted, Selena isn't being viewed as marriage potential here. However, just wanted to reference that. Women in general are put down. Women in general are contained and are forced to not be overly angry, overly, any kind of emotion, right? But just always remember that women of color, even more so, there's that level there too, that they're working towards that stereotype and fighting that stereotype too, which the queen is now playing into.
Yeah. And I have to say, when you become conscious of the stereotype of the angry Black woman, you see it everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. It is a crutch that media uses that is just plain inappropriate.
Absolutely. And then you can see the pendulum being swung the other way. And you now get characters that are not multifaceted and are only allowed to experience one emotion.
Like hypaxia.
Damn. Damn, SJM. We have a lot more growth to do.
Baby steps. Now, despite Dorian coming across as useless throughout this entire chapter, we do get to learn a little bit of how he thinks, which I think is worthwhile. Quote, as far as ambassadors went, Nehemia wasn't exactly the best choice, not when he'd heard rumors of her support of the Eelway rebels and her efforts to shut down the labor camp at Calicula. I think that's how it's pronounced. Dorian couldn't blame her for that, though, not after he'd seen the horror that was Endovier. Now, at this point, readers may be realizing, Dorian might actually have some sort of moral compass. He might not be terrible, since he is capable of thinking somewhat along the lines of Selena, and at least internally, he's calling out bullshit.
Yeah, but he's also so similar to Kale, where it's only real when Selena's involved, a woman that does he even respect her? He wants to sleep with, he kind of finds her funny. It's like, whoa, you guys, this is real. Real things happen. I know someone one time.
I saw your note as I was finishing speaking, and I was like, stab me. Dang it. I was trying to give Dorian the benefit of the doubt.
No, he gets no doubts. He gets no benefits.
Now, like Jack.
When I saw your note, I was shook. I was aghast. I was just sitting there going, okay. No, continue. It's fine. It's fine. You're also not wrong. Before Dorian... that, I will forget your name next.
Okay. You can start calling me Christy again. Now, like Jack, Dorian cannot remember names of unimportant people at court. Not that Jack has a court.
No, also, I want to clarify, I don't remember names of anyone, not just the unimportant people.
It's true. It's true. You have to have made an impression for her to remember your name.
And a couple months after that, really.
Yep. So on one hand, Dorian, not cool. Like, these are your subjects. These are your people. They're the aristocracy of your land. Like, you should know them. On the other hand, it also makes sense that when Dorian feels so disengaged, so separate or other from this world or this court, yeah, he's not going to retain the information because there's no connection there. I think also, on another hand, it also conveys how much random people probably come up to him and try to engage him, and how many different faces he sees on a regular basis. If that's the case, he's not able to make meaningful connections. And yeah, I guess it also makes sense that you can't remember their names. Oh, woeist princeliness.
No, you're talking about me again.
No. I was talking about Dorian. Like Dorian, though, through his descriptions, we see that the other members of court are ornaments just like himself. They are there to pleasure and distract the queen. We see this when Dorian starts to leave the court. Quote, he peered over the courtiers' jeweled encrusted heads as he strode from the jangle and jingle of the court. Just made me think of like Christmas ornaments on a tree. I don't know why.
It made me think of that TikTok. My money don't jingle jingle, it folds. Also, it shows like he's just so tall. He peers over the heads of everyone. He's like just super tall
he's
and
so
cute.
tall. Or everyone else is short. Whatever.
He's probably wearing lifts in those little fancy boots.
He's probably got heels on,
Yeah.
to be honest. Ultimately, Dorian doesn't take this place seriously, and neither should we.
No. So again, at this point, you guys might be like, hey, you're going really hard at Dorian. Allow us to pull out receipts. We get this moment on how he views women. Quote, what about Elise? The queen said, indicating a blonde woman clad in lavender. She's very beautiful and can be quite playful. As I've already learned. Elise bores me, he said. Now, the as I've already learned is a mental thing, which is why I try to do it lower. But like, he slept with Elise, or at least fooled around.
Yeah.
And then the answer to that is not only one, mild, like some slut shaming there of something I've already learned, but then followed up with she's boring, like she bores me.
Mm-hmm.
The fuck, my man. Okay, this is the episode where I don't try not to curse, not cursing, but I cannot express the amount of frustration of he devalues her because he's already slept with her, and then now she's boring. So, big asshole here. And then he has to be entertained by women in order to find them interesting. Let's look at the one woman he finds interesting is a freaking assassin. That's the level of entertainment he has to have in order to be somewhat interested. And even then, he doesn't see her for a really long time. So you have the one interesting woman that he's now has in his circle in forever, and he's still not even entertained enough to go talk to her often or at all, except he talks to her this episode. So I know for a fact that there are plenty of interesting women there. It's just to dismiss them all is annoying. Let's go back to the boredom thing, right? Is the fact that he's bored of Elise, that he's bored with the court, and he's just bored with everything. The thing is, I think boredom is just another word for unhappiness. And I use that like in myself when there was a period in my life where I felt bored and I felt like I had nothing to do. And then that's when I realized I was actually like very depressed. Now you could say I was depressed because I didn't have anything to do. I think that's a fair assessment. However, I think people those are interchangeable sometimes. And I think that's what it is here. Quote, the same ladies still looked at him with pleading eyes. The same serving girls still winked at him. The same councilman still slipped pieces of potential legislation under his door with hopeful notes. And his father would always be preoccupied with conquest and wouldn't stop until every continent bore Aderlin's flag. I want to point out, boredom is a privilege. Being able to say, I am bored and I don't have anything to do and nothing entertains me is a privilege. And I will even flag it myself. The times where I was bored is a freaking privilege. That's because I wasn't working to make ends meet. That's because I wasn't trying to raise a family on my own. Boredom is an absolute privilege, and he revels in his little privilegedness. And then, we were kind of talking about like Selena, that is the only one he finds interesting. He doesn't even care about Selena. Quote, it was clear Kane and Selena would ultimately face each other. Until then, well, the other champions weren't worth his time. He dismisses her so quickly. It's not even, I guess they're going to face each other. Whatever. The other ones suck. Like you have this contrast between Selena, who prayed for Sven, this human life that was taken. And then you have Dorian, who just does not give a flying fuck about anyone. Barely even her.
Yeah, he's not even concerned about whether or not she might be a target.
Yeah.
For attack,
hey, that's going to be a lot. Like, yeah, she's probably going to get there at the end, but at what cost? At what training? Not even checking in on her. But again, like Amy said, this is a very good example of how far he starts, like from how far he goes. And like, we have to drill into him because he sucks. One, it's the truth. Two, it's character growth and development, which we're going to applaud as we grow and develop.
Yeah. And just the complexity of what he experiences in the next 2 books.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
this is the baseline.
Yeah.
We have to get that baseline to really appreciate where his character is going to go.
And that's for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is more breadcrumb than anything, but I want to talk about an aspect of this. Quote, he felt as if there were something inside him that didn't fit in with the merriment, with their willing ignorance of the world outside the castle. It went beyond his title. He had enjoyed their company early in his adolescence, but it had become apparent that he'd always be a step away. The worst of it was that he didn't seem to notice he was different or that he felt different. I get it. There's a lot of times that everyone feels like they're outside their own body, that they're separate. And, he's like, they don't even know what's going on. They don't even care. And yet he makes no moves to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much you don't get to complain if you don't get to move, if you don't do anything.
Yeah.
They don't even know what's going on outside. Okay, then change their opinion. Like, then tell them, well, I just feel so on the outside. Then force your way in. You are the prince. You have a say here. Go find a different community. Go build a community.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all comes down to the idea, again, of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not he likes it, right? Whether or not he's bored. He is in a privileged position and he's comfortable being privileged.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm going to really dig into a little bit later.
We're going to we have the nail in the coffin. We're just going to keep tightening it. So his mom, again, also sucks. Like, she's part of the system. The system is broken and she's part of it.
Yeah.
She gives him a list of names. Quote, a list of potential brides. Any one of them would be suitable to take the crown. And all, I've been told, are quite capable of producing heirs. Women are just items to be viewed and dismissed. We are but names in a list that he will later just quickly trash. And even though men are expected to breed, it is nothing compared to women who are a list. And that's how Facebook started. That was just rating women and stuff. It's just, it's frustrating. You can have the concept of men being breeding, right? They're part of they're a stud to be bred, and you're in this concept of even men are viewed as animals and have to breed. It will never be the same as women because women have to then carry that child. Men can go and you can look at this as horses and as other animals that are bred and everything into humans. But one of the things where we were saying that there's still, at least there's some showing that men here in this world are expected to breed and view it in a very animalistic way. No matter what, women will always get it a little harder, a little worse.
Yeah,
because we gotta actually carry that shit.
Yep. So Dorian leaves court, and as he's meandering the hallways, SJM slips in just a little mention of Dorian's favorite dog, who is about to have pups, and I freaking love it. Now, I know it's going to do setup for the dog that Selena eventually has. However, let's talk about the dogs as metaphors, because who was just called a pet?
Dorian.
Quote, he hoped the pups would be pure, but their mother had a tendency to escape from her pen. She was his fastest, but he'd never been able to quell the wildness within her. From my point of view, the dog is like Dorian. Dorian dallies with the servants, with the courtiers, with maybe quote-unquote less suitable partners in the eyes of his mother. Now, Dorian is treating the dog the way his mother treats Dorian. Remember, his mother just literally called him pet. He doesn't want his dog to be messing around with the mutts. Just like his mother wants him to marry a courtier or a princess. He can't see the irony of it, that he is just perpetuating the system. But hopefully we as readers do see that.
And then you could even take it another step further, is who does he see immediately after this? Selena. And who is his pet? Selena. Yep. Another wild creature that he cannot contain.
Yep. Ugh.
It's a great moment from SJM's part.
It's a really great moment. As Jack alluded to, Dorian stumbles upon Selena training with Nehemia's guards and Nehemia watching from the sidelines. Instantly, Dorian thinks, quote, Where was Kale or Brullo? Why was Aderlin's assassin here with the Princess of Yilway and with a sword? This could not go on, especially after that champion's attempted escape the other day. Okay, first of all, he gave no shits about any of the champions dying or escaping previously.
I know.
Also notice Selena and Nehemia don't have names here. They have titles, which makes them less human, less of...
Oh, I missed that. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Ew.
And I think part of that is because he's just been in court. He is programmed, as probably everyone else is, to think of people in terms of tools, of pawns, of pieces to be used. And so Selena and Nehemia are just their roles. They are not women. They are not people for him to consider. Instead, they are pawns that shouldn't be interacting. Why are they allowed to interact right now? Part of that is because Dorian is programmed like Kale. He assumes the worst about Selena. And that's despite Dorian thinking, she is lovely to look at. He still assumes the worst.
Yeah.
Unlike Kale, Dorian has spent little to no time with Selena. So what's Kale's excuse? On the other hand, maybe Dorian senses that these two women would be a force of nature if they banded together. They are both outsiders who don't fit the mold. And for someone who just thought of himself as an outsider, I don't see why he doesn't see them as kindred spirits. But again, I don't understand men in general. Part of the reason why I think Dorian is struggling here, he doesn't think of Selena or Nehemia as women, as humans. He doesn't see them as kindred spirits, even though they're outsiders and he feels like an outsider. And I think that's because that challenges his zone of privilege, that challenges his comfort. And to do so, to see them as outsiders, and therefore kindred spirits, would A, be terrifying to admit to, and B, would have repercussions from both of his parents. And Dorian, as much as he will dally with the other lesser Aderlonians, I don't know what their names are, he's not ready to challenge what is comfortable. And that's why he will continue to be against Nehemia and Selena continuing to interact just like Kale, because it challenges what is comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I love this idea that they are kindred spirits, but at the same time, they are so not, because you have these two women who are making moves, who are aspiring, who are doing things. Granted, Selena is aspiring to live, but still something.
Yeah.
And she'll eventually kind of like, there's always that drive within her, right? She's not complacent. She's not just going to sit here and be bored with, everything that's going on around her. She's going to go find ways to get in trouble. Like, that's just who she is. Nehemia and Selena together are threatening. You have two powerful women, and he has not had a single powerful woman in his life. So now what does one do when you are relating to a type of person, a woman, a powerful woman that you've never encountered before? What does that say? Because now the only other woman who is close to powerful is his mother, who is not powerful, is able to control him, is able to tell him what to do. So what can these two women do to him then?
Yeah. That would be frightening, I'm sure.
Fear me. Selena, though, is not here for Dorian's shit. When Dorian comes over and he just goes to Selena like, what the hell are you doing? What is this? Like, such an overreaction. Let the women have fun. She says, quote, "She insisted on joining. Apparently, a woman can only go so long without a sword between her hands." She bit her lip. "I don't recall you being so talkative." "Well, perhaps if you'd taken the time to speak with me, you'd have found me to be so." There's the innuendo, where she's like, women need a sword in their hand, and she bites her lip. He doesn't even like it. Like, he doesn't play.
Yeah.
He then insults her for being talkative. It's like, for now you're speaking. This isn't what you're supposed to do. You shouldn't be having opinions and talking back to me. And if it's not a sexual innuendo on his initiative, on his, like, that he's started, if it's not something that he has started, it's not like he doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Because he's not in control.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that she calls him out. She was like, well, maybe if you had freaking come and talk to me, we would actually talk.
Yeah. then you'd know how talkative I am. So despite their little
Tete-a-tete.
tete-a-tete, great use of that. I
Thank
have
you.
not heard that word in so long. Dorian cannot help himself. He has to acknowledge his attraction to Selena. Quote, his heart quickened when her gaze rose to his face. Yes, sweaty as she was beautiful. I laugh, but the sweatiness, I can guarantee right now is part of the attraction because this is exactly not the kind of woman Dorian's mother wants him to be with.
That's not the kind of man he is either. He's not a sweaty man.
No, he's not. He wants whatever is furthest away from the list of names that his mother just gave him. He is like internally, maybe not entirely through his actions yet, but internally he is just like his hound. He is rebellious. Selena just happens to be the first woman who doesn't fit the mold, who fell into his path and fits that need for rebellion on Dorian's part. Therefore, I ask, is the attraction even genuine? Is Dorian capable of a true connection with Selena when he himself is struggling with who he is, his unhappiness, and his lack of power? Selena is going to be a vehicle for power, not only in the King's Champion way, but in fighting this idea that he needs to be married.
It's almost like you just have people who should be attracted to each other. You know what I mean? Where, I mean, I guess we're both hot. I guess you're the perfect woman for me to rebel against my mother. And for Selena, it's like, well, I guess you're the kind of guy that I probably would have been forced to potentially marry if I was still princess and my parents were alive. Like, all of them are things of, well, I guess that's what I should do, type of a relationship.
Yeah, and it's very high school. And they are high school age. They are 18 and 19.
Yeah.
It is it looks like what everyone says it looks like, or
Yeah.
it feels like this is what would be expected of me.
Yeah,
I'll just do it.
So do we like kiss? I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're a jock. Oh, you're a cheerleader. Okay, I guess we belong together.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Yep. So I do want to call out that we are currently in Dorian's point of view. So I kind of want to wonder, how much can we trust of what Dorian is seeing? Quote, aren't you afraid of me? She glanced at his sword belt. Or are you as deft at handling your sword as Captain Westfall? He stepped closer, tightening his grip. Better, he whispered in her ear. There, she was blushing and blinking. So earlier she tried to use sex, and then now he's using sex. And, like even now she's like, is that a gun in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me type of a thing? And he's like, I can handle it better. But again, she's kind of like, there's this whole sex between Kale and versus him. And, there's that underlining concept there. But I have to ask, how much does she want him to know? Now, in the next chapter, one of the very first things we see is Selena being like, damn, I blush so easily with him.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe I'm giving Selena too much credit. She is a 19-year-old girl, so, maybe this is me expecting too much from her. I feel like if she wanted to hold the cards closer to her chest, she would.
Yeah.
I think her blushing and her indulging him is not just healing from Sam, which we'll get into, but a tactic that she's using over him.
Explain.
I did. That was it. No, I'm kidding.
Why does she need this tactic to use against him?
I think she's using her, we'll call it quote unquote girlishness, this blushing, this, kind of like a little flustered, to make him feel better. She does tell him at one point, perhaps you're just a little bit afraid of me. And I think that's, she's trying to elicit something from him. Like she wants that. And in order to get someone to elicit a feeling, is to almost like, how would he react if she was giving him absolutely nothing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would he even still be engaging with her like this?
Yeah.
So I just wonder if she would have been better at holding it closer to her chest, because look, I'd say there's a connection and an attraction to Kale. And she's not as overt with Kale as she is with Dorian.
Yeah.
she's done a few things, teased him a few times, but this whole biting her lip, saying, can you handle your sword type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's allowing her blush to show with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you have this next quote here where, Selena's kind of teasing Dorian, hey, you should go spar with the princess. That's what she wants. And he says, quote, I will not spar with the princess. Would you rather spar with me? Perhaps if we had private lessons in your chamber, he said smoothly. Tonight. I'll be waiting. She curled her hair around a finger.
I forgot how much they flirt.
I know. It's very, also that, like, I want to do it to my own hair. Like, maybe tonight. It's just so, that's what I mean by she's using her girlishness, her flirtiness, because I think she is flustered and flirting, but she's letting him see that and is really putting it out there for him. Because I think she's also trying to match his sexy chicken, because that's what this is. This is a game of sexy chicken, and we've discussed this. SJM likes to do this where they play sexy chicken, and it's like who's gonna cave first, and no one has enough vision here. She has the opportunity of Kale and Dorian, and no one is willing to play sexy chicken. I would win. Actually, I would cave. I would have run away. So I am such a big talk.
You talk a big game.
I talk such a big game. One time, all right, side note. One time I went to a hockey game, and we were my friend and I were watching players play, warm up and stuff. And there was one player who was single, and he made eye contact. It was, I am looking at you and I am holding your eye contact. I am holding eye contact with you. I caved so fast. I looked away. I had nothing. I was like, nope, I don't want this. And yet I would love this. I would love to talk to you. I would love to go on a date. However, I am all talk. I am incapable.
It was a lost opportunity.
It was such a lost opportunity. Yeah. And then every time I went back, eye contact? Do you want to look at me? Do you remember me? Eye contact? Nope.
So I love everything you're talking about. I never really thought about it as maybe Selena trying to get a one-up on Dorian or like use her girlishness against him. But I do see how right now they are both vying for power.
Mm-hmm.
Selena doesn't have power over Kale. Dorian does not have power over his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so the flirting game is them both trying to win against each other. Who is going to dominate the other, because both of them are powerless right now. I see that. On the other hand, something I'm going to talk about later as we get further into the episode, I also think Selena's really lonely.
Yeah.
I also think Selena, while she has grown comfortable, right, and Sven's death has kind of jostled her, I do think she's getting to a point where she's like, I might be able to actually have friends again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether or not she's capable of fully trusting them again or trusting them at all, she's been alone for a really long time. She's lost a lot of people in her life, which again, we'll get into. Kale, Nehemia, Dorian, there's a reason why these people become Selena's friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because she doesn't have any, and they're the first opportunity for her to build friendships.
Yeah, maybe you don't play sexy chicken with people you want to be friends with.
Just saying.
We start chapter 18, and we're now answering the question of how into it is she, and with the into it being flirting with Dorian. And the answer is she is flustered with him. She is attracted to him. Quote, it made her uneasy how he'd made her blush. In fact, he was so attractive that she had difficulty not thinking about how attractive he was. And again, wondering why he wasn't married. She sort of wanted to kiss him. It's that line of she sort of wanted to kiss him that makes me think that she is not as flustered by him. It's just kind of like, I think as you get older, you don't have crushes as much. And mainly because you don't meet enough people. It's not like you have a class that you get to just kind of see someone and have a little crush on them and stuff. And half the fun of a crush is the hype of it. Mm-hmm. She sort of wanted to kiss him. Kind of is a maybe we will, maybe we won't. We'll see. And it's not like 1 foot forward specifically. It's not like saying, yes, I definitively find him attractive. I want to act upon this attraction. It's kind of like, well, he's hot. Yeah, I'll test it. I'll test it.
Why not?
Why not? Also, I mean, of course, like this is someone who keeps trying to use sex over her, and yet so it's like already he's horny
Yeah.
and she's lonely. So, what a perfect attraction. What a perfect
Right.
pair. So what's though is the difference between the physical attraction between her and Dorian versus the physical attraction between her and Kale? Because, there is a love triangle happening here. And for every overt thing she's saying about Dorian, she's also not saying something about Kale.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when I saw your question, my immediate thoughts were attraction to Dorian, as we've seen, is purely physical,
Mm.
but
Mm-hmm.
also, as we've already talked about, also about power.
Mm-hmm.
Either power over each other, or the power the other person has to be a means of escape from their
Mm.
circumstances, right? Dorian is the key to Selena's freedom. Selena is the key for Dorian to reject his parents' expectations.
Yeah.
So there's power in that, and that's attractive to both of them.
Yeah.
On
Yep.
the flip side, attraction to Kale, Selena's not even capable of really articulating that at the moment, even though she feels it. It's mostly because of that mutual respect. She spent a lot more time with Kale than she has with Dorian.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that is why Kale's future actions and some actions that he's going to have just in this episode put that respect in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And ultimately will shatter it in the future.
Yep. Kale then shows up and he's pissy when he sees Dorian and Nehemia training. So he then fights with Selena and she says she needs to be there. She needs to train. And she says, "You think I want to go back to Endovier?" She hissed. "You think I'm not aware of the fact that if I flee, I'll be hunted down for the rest of my life? Do you think I don't know why I vomit when you and I run in the morning? My body is a wreck. I need to spend these extra hours and you shouldn't punish me for it." I'm loving the self-reflection. I'm loving the honesty. This confession almost feels like a confession and a breaking point where she can no longer hold the truth in, so much so it comes out in a aggressive whisper yelling match.
I think that's a great point. It is a point kind of no return for her, not only in seeing her reality, but in challenging Kale to tell her she's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that she starts with, "You think I'm not aware of the fact that if I flee, I'll be hunted down for the rest of my life." She's thinking of Sven right
Yeah.
there. That
Yeah.
is what she is first and foremost thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to dig into the underlying emotions that both Kale and Selena have in this scene, because I think we have to understand that to get at the real cause of this fight that they're having. Because it's not really about, I mean, on some level, it's about Selena and Nehemia, right? About them being together, but it's really more than that.
Yeah.
First off, on Kale's part, I do think he is genuinely pissed because Selena, Nehemia, Dorian, none of them are doing what he's told them to do. He's used to being in control. He's used to people listening to his orders, and these three are not capable of it. So when he encounters the three of them together, Kale has to exert control because nothing is under his control. It's not just about these three anymore. It's about the fact that there are champions being murdered in the
Mm-hmm.
palace that he is meant to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're dying mysteriously and he cannot find the cause. Kale's authority is being challenged on many, many levels, and his ability to keep his rulers safe, which is his only job, really. I think that is why Kale ultimately lashes out at Selena with the words, quote, "I'm not going to pretend to know how a criminal mind works." If we look back at the start of chapter 16, Kale had so much empathy for Selena. However, that has gone out the window. And I think it went out the window the second that Sven assaulted a guard. It is a rude reminder to Kale that Sven is like Selena. They are criminals.
Yep.
And they can do damage, right?
Yep.
I think the guard is like in the equivalent to being in an ICU, right? He was like, probably has a concussion or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I think Kale is coming from in this scene. It's really about he's kind of going into this spiral of ever since Selena's arrival, ever since this contest started, can't hold on to his power anymore.
Yeah. I love that. And on the flip side, you also have Selena, who I think is really confused of the moment and doesn't actually know what's happening. So she's just kind of lashing out in her own way.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, I actually felt a little guilty. And now I remember why I shouldn't have. I hate sitting around locked in my room, bored out of my senses. I hate all these guards and nonsense. I hate you telling me to hold back when Burlow sings Kane's praises, and I'm just there, boring and unnoticed in the middle. I hate being told what I can't do, and I hate you most of all. So, like, there's a lot of anger. So many things. Okay, very similar to Dorian when he was having his, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm bored and everything sucks moment, except hers is valid,
Mm-hmm.
except for the fact that she hates that Kane gets praises and she doesn't, where it's like, I need you to let this go. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to have a version of this where Kane is actually just super innocent and nothing is wrong with him, and he just, it's all in her head, and like he's not actually heckling her. He just thinks that she's super pretty.
Yeah. You write that fan fiction.
I will. But one of the questions I kind of thought was, why is she guilty at the start? Like,
Mhm.
and I know there's that moment of, I actually felt guilty. What, guilty that you're letting the two royals spar? Because I don't see what you could feel guilty about that.
Mhm.
These are
Mhm.
two people who are over you, who have a say in what they're doing, and you don't get to control what they're doing here. But then I was like, does she feel guilty about flirting with Dorian? Maybe just
Mm,
just a little potential. Maybe
that
I'm just starting shit, but
you could be.
yeah.
I also I also spent a lot of time thinking about this because we don't really get clarity on this statement. And I want to suggest that Selena's feelings for Kale are really complex.
Mhm.
On one hand, I think it's natural for Selena to maybe resent Kale. He is her jailer. He is the person that is there to monitor her, make sure she doesn't step out of line, make sure that she doesn't flee. So he is the metaphorical shackles on her wrists in a lot of way. At the same time, she's also learning to respect him. She's learning to like him. She feels safe to be vulnerable with him. Then let's also think about the fact she's been using him. Up until
Mhm.
now, every time she spends time with him, she asks him to help her tour the palace so that she becomes more familiar with it. It's so she can plot escape routes and knows all the weaknesses and knows where the guards are positioned, right? She has been using him also for information
Yeah.
and is therefore a tool. So all of this is jumbled up. And then you have the fact that Kale did not care about Sven when Sven was killed and only cared about the guard. And maybe Selena feels guilty for doubting Kale. Maybe she thinks, you know what, Kale's a good guy though. He would treat me like a human. He's shown empathy
Yeah.
for me. But Kale's shown he's capable of no empathy as well.
Yep.
What I think this all boils down to is, again, Selena is lonely. She is grasping for intimacy. And for her to admit the things that she says, I don't want to go back to Endovier. I admit that I'm weak. I'm bored. I hate being here.
Mhm.
She is being vulnerable in a very overt way because she's used to being vulnerable with Kale and sharing that intimacy. However, at the end of the day, that intimacy has been robbed from her
Mhm.
because of Sven's death.
Yeah.
Because Kale has not sought her out since then, has not talked to her since then. I think Selena is afraid the person she's grown closest to, which is Kale, could in fact be her enemy. And she might be guilty that she's even considering that. So, all of this to say, I also think Selena's lashing out to see if being vulnerable will earn vulnerability from Kale, because it's always been quid pro quo between them.
Yeah.
When one is vulnerable, the other gives back vulnerability.
Yep.
And that's Selena trying to test the waters of like, are we still friends? Are we still capable of having a friendship when you are also capable of killing someone like me?
Yep.
And in this moment, Kale does not give her that.
No.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would also love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle booktalkforbooktalk.
Bye.
She should be stronger than them, but she's not.
Yeah, I love that perspective of it, that it's actually her pride that's making her cry. I want to look a little bit more in this quote just from a little different perspective. I'm gonna scooch there we go. I think I needed it like 1 inch to the right. Oh. Okay, I'm just gonna stop moving
As you continue to move.
I can't be trusted. Okay, I'm done. Okay, wait till you're done sipping.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the Roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan, I can wear it on its own, I can wear it with a blazer, and it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.